Hello, Counter-Strike fans. Richard Lewis here, and welcome to the Rivalry Counter-Strike specific channel. They used to put all of their stuff in one place, and now they're dividing it up across games. So the Dota content will go to the Dota channel, and so I'm told the Counter-Strike content will go to the Counter-Strike channel. And obviously, I'm a Counter-Strike guy, although I have many strings to my bow. And joining me is somebody who's very much active in the Counter-Strike scene, a commentator that's been around for a while. He's had his ups, he's had his downs, he's back in the saddle. It is dusT Mouret. So I'll be honest, because I know you and we've known each other for years. Every time there's an interview, I don't always feel compelled to go out and watch it, because I just talk to you anyway. So I'm trying to figure out, because somebody must have asked you this, right? Like how you all got started all up in this business and shit, right? Like I don't know how common a question it is or how many times you've told the story.
Well, this is actually the first long-term interview I've ever done, long-form interview I've ever done.
Really?
The only other stuff I've really done have been short interviews at events. I think I did one podcast with that CSGO podcast guy. But yeah, I've never really done a long form interview before.
All right. Well, fuck, man, that's good.
Yeah.
So let's start then at the beginning. Obviously, a lot of people, get into casting in sort of similar ways. Was yours any different to the kind of typical commentator story?
Not really sure. I started out just playing Counter-Strike Source for fun. Some friends of mine that I played Halo 1 on PC with introduced me to Counter-Strike Source. And it started out just kind of playing mini games like Zombie Mod and Surf and stuff like that. We would just do it late at night after we got done playing Halo all day. And eventually I fell more and more in love with Counter-Strike Source and eventually started competing in Cal Open and eventually in ESEA. And I got to main in ESEA, which is right below Invite. Nowadays, you have Advanced Mountain Dew League and stuff between main and Invite, but then I was kind of right below the Pro League. And I eventually was a six-man for a pro team as well called Second Nature that was popular in North America at the time. But yeah, so I was playing a lot, and what happened is I had just started seeing people commentate the game. I had no idea that even was a thing. I think the first thing I saw broadcasted was actually CGS, funny enough, for all its failures. That actually kind of turned me on to esports broadcasting. And I think the second thing I saw was Jimmy Wisenhut and Corey Dunn used to cast ESEA lands for 1.6. Yeah. And so I saw that and I was like, this is really cool. I want to do this, basically. And I just worked for a bunch of small companies, pre-Twitch. It was very difficult to run your own streams or host a stream. And so I just had to rely on other people that knew how to do that stuff. But eventually I just worked for these really small companies. Some of them you might know. I worked for this company called GameFire that was actually owned by some people that did TSN back in the day. And then they kind of folded. Then I went to Ponage TV, which they had a really prominent TF2 caster named Leo Geo2 that some people might know that I worked with over there. And just different little small companies like that. But eventually one of them, it was called Source Collective. And then eventually later got renamed Esports Collective, and they got picked up by ESEA to become the initial ESEA TV team.
Yeah, I think I remember that actually. That rings a bell. I remember Source Collective for sure.
Yeah. So that's how I actually got started getting paid gigs was ESEA. That was I guess back in 2011 is when I actually finally, after casting for 4 or so years for these different little small companies, just as a volunteer, I guess you could say, all through high school and undergraduate years of college, I eventually, landed on the initial ESEA TV team. This is actually even before Sadicus and all those guys came along. They came later, so that's kind of how I got started.
So a lot of people have this perception, that if you're going to be a commentator or a journalist or, whatever it is, if you've ever been a player and then you go and do this other thing, it's always kind of the running joke that you must have failed as a player, right? And that's why you did this other stuff. So talk me through the very early days. You said you loved the game. You said you wanted to stay involved with it. Was it just a reality that you just kind of couldn't hang as a player and you were looking to kind of stay involved, or did you sort of feel drawn to this specific type of work?
Well, first off, in Counter-Strike Source, I definitely was never going to be good enough to be a professional. I knew that. I was actually kind of surprised I was able to get to where I got because I was mostly just relying on being kind of an in-game leader and a support player to even get to the semi-pro teams, if you want to call it that, in main. And then being a six-man was mostly just because I was active and I could, help out in other areas than just being a really good fragger. So I knew pretty early on there was no chance I was going to be professional at Source, and I never even tried in CSGO. I was already really firmly locked into trying to be, a commentator. and eventually an analyst later on down the line. So yeah, I think for me, it wasn't necessarily that I knew I couldn't be a pro is why I wanted to do it. I think I wanted to do it anyway. I think that the focus pretty early on, as soon as I figured out that commentary was a thing and that it was something you could actually pursue, like I knew I wanted to do it. Which was kind of funny because I never really thought of myself that way. I was never super interested in like traditional sports commentary or anything like that. I was obviously super into games, and eventually when I learned about competitive gaming and esports and stuff early on, I was super hooked on it. But yeah, being a commentator, never thought that would be anything I would ever pursue. In fact, I was like pre-med going into college. I thought I was going to be a doctor. Then eventually I went into, I was like early
pre-med.
Yeah, I was initially when I first joined college. Later on, I actually wanted to change my major to history and communications. So I doubled up on those two things. But yeah, it was kind of random, but it was just something once I saw it, it just drew me in, and I never looked back really.
So what were you doing in how you presented the broadcasts back then? Because, when I did my first casting, it was done, I mean, literally as on a community cup, where basically we just had a TeamSpeak channel where only the casters could speak and everyone else just sat in the channel, muted and unable to ping anyone or anything. And they could only hear what you were saying. And that's how it was. And, we used to get 50, sometimes close to 100 people all on TeamSpeak, like listening, and that was how I got started in it. But I mean, sounds like you went pretty much straight into something a bit more polished and professional than that, at least.
Yeah, I suppose, so basically back then, before Justin TV and Twitch, and this was, I think when I first started actually casting, it must have been maybe 2008, 2009 when I got started, and, I was focusing a lot on play-by-play commentary back then, and it basically just got hosted on different websites. So, when I worked for this company called GameFire, they had their own website and it ran their own stream, and basically people could either watch the stream, watch the video, and listen to us because we would all be together on TeamSpeak or whatever for the audio portion. Or if the delay was just right, they could actually just watch the source TV and then they could listen to us if they wanted to by just having like the stream open on the website. And it's basically that way, through all the early companies I work with, like GameFire, Ponish TV, eRev, all these different people I worked with. It was just all their personal websites. And I don't know how they ran the stream or what the viewers were or anything like that. I didn't care. I was just there to cast because I thought it was just super fun. And it wasn't until when I started working with ESEA that, Twitch kind of started becoming a thing, and then, streams were hosted there. But yeah, so early on, I never was like part of the Shoutcaster plugin days. Like I wasn't that early on. But yeah, certainly it was definitely a lot less than what it is today.
So the big gig, the breakout, what is the point where you really feel that you nailed it to a point where, you start to get a little bit of notoriety, a little bit of fame? You start to think to yourself, you know what? I'm not a guy who does commentary on the side for fun. I'm actually a guy who's going to be a commentator. That's how I'm going to define myself moving forward.
Ooh, that's a tough one because I think maybe being a part of the first ever CSGO LAN in North America was kind of a big moment for me. That was like 2012. Okay. That was like a pretty big moment. I was actually casting with Sadakis at that event, and Moses and a couple other guys were at that event. I think Van Silly is someone you're gonna know who was back there. I think Anders was at that one as well. So I think that was like the moment where I wanted to do it like as a job, because then I was still very much a full-time college student working part-time jobs on top of casting and going to school. So I didn't really think of it as a career. But honestly, man, if you want to talk like actually a moment where I felt like maybe I could turn it into a job, it probably wasn't until E-League Season 1, honestly. And that was only just a couple of years ago. Because before that, I was always just very sure that, yeah, this is kind of fun, but I don't know that I'll ever be able to turn this into a career. I need to focus on school and making sure I get my degree. And, I was still very much in the mindset of a traditional career path. And even kind of in the middle of 2015, I actually quit for like 6 months and I didn't do any casting work because I thought it was over. Like I had a really bad experience at like a CSGO event that I was at. Not CSGO's fault or MLG's fault or anything. It was just my own head. My mother had passed away earlier that year as well. And I was just in a really bad place mentally. And it wasn't until early 2016, really, when I met you guys at that CSGO Gfinity event and did that. And then the E-League Season 1 that I actually kind of really got back in the swing of wanting to pursue it as some sort of job.
So let's talk a little bit about the dark patch, where you're kind of doubting that you want to do this. I mean, it's one thing if it's like something that you fuck around with, if it's like it's never really what you want to do. Like I know players, who are even like that. Like they could have gone pro, but they just never wanted to actually. Like they were just good enough to do it, but they wanted to be something else. They didn't want to be a pro esports player. And certainly back in the day, there wasn't really the incentives to, why would I do that, right? Over anything else. It might be a little bit different now. But, when you're having that thought process about, I'm just going to kind of, quit and go do something else. What was really precipitating that? Was it because you didn't think, you could get into that upper echelons, be that tier one, be that regular gig, kind of guy and make enough money so you didn't have to worry about anything else? Or was it something else? Was it like, I don't know, maybe you didn't, it wasn't what you wanted to do with your life, or you had some self-doubt, you didn't think you were able to do it?
I think it was a mixture of a lot of things. I think a lot of it is what you said, like the fear of not being able to get consistent work, the fear of not being able to earn enough to, actually truly make it a full-time job. And that's something I still deal with to this day. But I think back then, a lot of it was also just because I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. Like I had hit the ceiling I was never going to break past. And, back then I was very much a play-by-play commentator. Really, I didn't change into being more of a color caster and analyst until, like I met you at E-League Season 1, basically. So I think a lot of it was just I felt like all these other play-by-play commentators were surpassing me. I wasn't getting anywhere. I was getting a lot of flack from the community at times on like the ESEA forums and stuff like that. And I just had really felt like, man, I don't know what I can do to be better than I am. And apparently what I am now isn't good enough to get me to where I need to be. And so there was
What kind of flack were you getting?
I mean, people always just like hated my voice, hated my accent, was like one of the biggest things I used to always get flack for. Which, if you go back and look at old videos for me back then, my voice sounds way different than it does now. I've really learned how to use it better, I think, over the years. But back then it was just very nasally, just very Southern accents. I still have a bit of a Southern accent, but it's definitely not as heavy as it used to be. So it was things like that would get me. Back then I wasn't as knowledgeable about the game, so I would get called out for, not knowing things that probably I should, which was why when I did kind of starting at the beginning of 2016, kind of really focus more on analysis and stuff, that I really put in those hours. And that's where I really kind of built that work ethic, because it was just always like this chip on my shoulder that I needed to prove myself, that I knew what I was talking about. Because, back then I didn't know what I was talking about a lot of the time, right? So I think that was kind of the bulk of the flack, but it could always just be random stuff, something I said that someone didn't like, whatever it is, right? It's hard for me to remember it all in detail, but it was a bunch of random stuff at once.
So anyway, sorry, I did interrupt there a little bit. So there wasn't sort of any prevailing sense that, actually your calling was off and far away. Like, like you did want to kind of stay involved with it. It was just that you kind of felt that circumstance was converging to make that very difficult, because, people were like maybe getting out ahead of you, or there wasn't a lot of money involved in it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was also right at the time that I was graduating college. I graduated with my master's degree in the very end of 2015, which also kind of coincided with that last LAN event I did with TiVo and MLG. And, that combined with some, personal stuff I had going on in my life, and combined with some of the flack I was getting from the community, and, all of it just was like this perfect storm. It was just like, I need to just get out of this. And, I get my degree, I'll go, pursue a traditional career with that. And it wasn't until, the next year where I think initially actually James Bardoff from Face It hit me up to cast like a couple of like these random online qualifiers with himself and Vince and DDK. And then, CSGO contacted me the next year, like at the very beginning of 2016. They're like, hey, we know that you want to quit, and we know that, you just graduated and you're having a hard time, but we just have this new partnered league with Gfinity. We'd really love you to be a part of it. Would you consider coming back and doing it? And it was really that kind of brought me back in, that opportunity. And then, that finals I met you at back in, I think it was like April of 2016. That's kind of what got me back on the path of, okay, I do want to do this. Like, it was a mistake to walk away. Like, I want to really give this a shot. And at this point, I was thinking to myself, I'll give it this year. Like, I'll see what I can do in 2016 and see how far I can get. And then depending on how that goes, I'll either, keep going, or I'll be like, hey, I had a good run, but now it's time to use this degree to go get a job. Right. And so that's kind of what happened.
So I've said this before, and you can tell me what you think of this statement, but I always think one of the biggest problems that that you've sort of faced is I don't think a lot of the people you work with really know how to use you best. So, for example, I always thought there was definitely room for you to be like, a stats guy, like a very, analytical kind of dude. Because like every time you came to events, like you were always one of the most well prepared like people there. For a while, it was like almost like a joke, because you used to come with that big old fucking folder full of stats and numbers, and you knew your shit. You weren't just like reading it. Like you obviously put it in there and you remembered it and you could pull it out. So I always felt that, and I said this at Gfinity. I always thought these were the best parts of that broadcast when we worked together was when you were on the desk. And it was like, hey, let's ask what dusT thinks about this, like crunch the numbers, and you would pull out and say, well, actually, they have this percentage chance, but then this changes when these things happen. I always thought that was the kind of area that I would want to see you go into. Now, you can work that as a color commentator, sure, but I always felt like you would have been much better served if people had given you like more desk work. And like put you on the desk and knew how to package it, because like with Thorin, Thorin's a good example. We have a specific way of doing things when Duncan's on the broadcast. I have a specific way of hosting and the way I present questions to him and the things I ask him. You pair Duncan up with a pro, tends to work out pretty well. You got some humor, you got some history, you got some in-game knowledge. I ask the right questions. We all make it work, right? But what I always saw with you is you would get put into games where it was like you would suddenly be the play-by-play dude, or sometimes the color dude. But like you know how color commentary is. I mean, fuck, man. Like if you do it traditionally, you get like 15 seconds to say shit. So like if you've got all these amazing statistics and insights, you don't get to use them. So. I always felt that was basically one of the biggest problems for you, is like that you could do all these roles, but nobody ever took the time to really put you into a niche. Like, I don't know if you agree with that or if I'm way off.
I mean, I definitely, so first of all, most of the first years I was a play-by-play caster. Like that was my focus. That's what I thought I was going to be and what I wanted to be. It wasn't really until like 2016 that I kind of thought, you know what, I really enjoy studying the game. I really enjoy the strategy of the game. That's what makes the game beautiful to me. I almost enjoyed innovative tactics and nades more than I enjoyed watching like, big frags or something like that. So that, and just kind of, how my brain works, I kind of drifted more towards, thinking I could be a better color commentator than play-by-play. My voice is better for it. And desk work obviously was also something I was really into. As far as like the stats thing goes, I wouldn't say that I'm that advanced when it comes to statistics. I think I know the basics, like, map pool, like win rate, things like that. But I'm not like privy to more advanced statistics, and I don't even really have a background in statistics or mathematics or anything like that. So I don't know how far I could really take stats. If anything, the bulk of my research is more of like recent results, recent player form, map pool, pick ban, and then I watch a lot of demos. So I'm really privy to what roles players like to play, or what spots they might have changed between this tournament and this tournament, as far as like how they're playing their CT side, or what new tactic they added, like what new innovation have they brought to the table. I think I'm really more oriented towards strategy and tactics more than anything else. And as far as the whole analysis
I'm just gonna say, just before you get to that, that's actually one of the things that I definitely identify as a strength, because I'll be honest, there's been events that I've worked, and I've done analysis as well, and it's like you get a team brought up and you're like, fuck, I don't even know, like I'm talking about the players on this map, but I don't even know where they play. You know what I mean? It's like I've watched them, but I've never like took it in and made a point of remembering it. So, like, one of the things that always impressed me when we used to do events with you was, like, you always were like, well, this player plays on B, and he typically does this, and this player plays over here, and typically does this. And it's like, I wish there was parts of a broadcast where when we start talking about the map and start talking about the team, it's like, we see all the players, like, in the positions where they are, and then somebody like you would be talking over it, right, and explaining it. So, that's another area I think, like, you would really excel at,
I tried to bring that up a lot actually with different companies and tournament organizers that it would be cool because like a lot of people do weatherman segments post game to break down like a play that happened. But what if you had a pre-game weatherman segment where you kind of set up what the viewers about to see? And so a lot of times people want to do player versus player matches. They'll just pick like Opper versus Opper or star player versus star player, in-game leader versus in-game leader. What if you had like positionally based player matchups? Like I know this guy defends banana, and I know that this guy is the guy typically fighting for banana control. Obviously, banana control is a key part of Inferno. So these two guys are going to be clashing a lot. Like that's the key matchup. Like I always thought that would be a really cool kind of pregame segment to do. But obviously, the amount of time you have on the desk is already pretty limited. So fitting stuff like that in, not really sure how feasible that is depending on, what event it is. But yeah, so that's definitely something that I like. But, if I'm being 100% honest with you, I think a lot of it is just like, trying to get me consistent analyst test work is so very hard because there's just, this idea of credibility, I think is really big. And no matter how researched and knowledgeable I am, people will always see the professional players or former professional players as more credible than me. They're also going to have bigger brands than me. They're also going to, be more popular. Maybe they have better camera presence. Maybe they have better personality, whatever the case may be. They're always going to be the more desirable target for death spots. And there's already less death spots than casting spots at events anyway. And then there also just seems to be like a never-ending flood of players coming in. So anytime someone maybe steps away to go back to playing, or like Yanko going to coaching, more people come in and fill the void. And so while there might be gaps here and there where maybe there's a need for analysts, it quickly gets filled whenever other players decide they want to step down. And I mean, even you said this yourself, like on your streams at times, that you think like that the perfect world is going to be that the desk should be more and more by former pros. And so that is very much the case. And outside of Thorin and maybe Bleh, and Thorin's obviously a special case because he has such a, crazy brand around him. And he has such a, distinct style of analysis and entertainment that is really key. Outside of me and then, Bleh from India, there is no other people trying to be analysts that aren't former professional players in some version of Counter-Strike. And so that's always an uphill battle for me. It always has been. And that's why I've always known that I have to be flexible and, given the right opportunity, maybe try to focus back on being more of a color commentator instead.
Yeah,
and that's just thinking like logically on like what's my best chance to get opportunities,
Yeah, sure. And I think that's obviously something else you have to think about, right? Like it's not so much what you want to do. It's like, what are you willing to do to get the gigs? I always think, though, the problem with that is you can very quickly find yourself like almost like typecast. Like I hate being a host. Like straight up, I fucking hate it. I think it's so fucking dull, and I've just got it down, and I just know what I'm doing with it, and I just feel comfortable. And the last step in my development and like my learning, I felt, was E-League. And doing it for TV directors and working with people of that caliber. Once I got that kind of under my belt, I was kind of like, it'd be nice to be the guy that gives the fucking opinions. I mean, then again, I think we all look at the other guy's job and think, I'd like to do that. Like, I think everybody's like, oh, the play-by-play guys are the rock and roll guys. I'd like to do that job. And it's like, it's great until you're getting fucked like Semler was, right? And then, everyone's like, but yeah, being an analyst, like you only have to do 15-minute segments and then you just sit in the green room all day. That's the real shit, and they get paid the same. And so people want to do that. And then, but the host, he does all the throws and the tosses and everyone knows him. And there's only a few of those guys, so maybe you want to do that. So it's definitely one of those things where I think the grass is greener a little bit. But yeah, for me, the ideal segment for you was... and let's go over to dusT for the inside track, and boom, like you would be talking about it and you'd have some tools that you could use, like an electronic thing, and not just like a telestrator, but actual shit that was all pre-planned and pre-arranged, and you get your own little segment like that. I always thought that was the best, like if I was building a show from scratch, that's where I'd put you. But anyway, that being said, back on the color commentary trail, back doing some analysis. Let's fast forward to the E-League period, right? Which was, as you said, that was where we had a big step up in terms of money coming in and sort of credibility and kudos. So talk me about getting called up for that, because obviously I know from my perspective, because I had a little bit to do with it, but I don't know if you saw that coming or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I did and I didn't. So I very distinctly remember after that Gfinity SIVO event was over. That was my first ever death segment, by the way, ever. Period. Was me, you, and Thorin for that grand finals at that SIVO Gfinity. That was like April 2016. So I mean, obviously, I went in super prepared, knowing that I really wanted the opportunity. And it was kind of the perfect storm that had happened. Like Puckett had to leave, you switched it over to the host role, and then we rotated. I think it was myself, Ryu, and Launders all came in and did like one segment each or something like that. So it was kind of by chance I even got a slot to do a death segment, because before it wasn't going to be that way. So that was crazy in itself. And then I just remember doing that segment and you know, getting some praise from Thorin on Twitter, yourself as well, and people seeming to really like it. And then I remember very distinctly, well, maybe not distinctly because we were all pretty tore up, but we had that after party and we were all just a mess. And I remember you came up to me like at the bar, we were drinking, and you said, "You're going to be on TV" or some shit like that. And I was just like, I thought at first, I was just like, all right, whatever, man. Like, sure, that's a cool story and everything, but that's probably not gonna happen. And then I remember like, nah, like I'm gonna make it happen. I actually started like crying because I was like so thankful that I might get an opportunity, but then I still wasn't 100% sure if it was real or not. And then I just remember getting back home from that event. I think I got called by Ben maybe just like a few days after I got home from that event to ask me about it, and still couldn't really believe it. You know, I was kind of blown away, and because I remember I had been talking to him and some of the other league people, because I just thought maybe I can do some content for them or something. Like maybe I can be involved in some other way. I didn't ever think I would actually be a broadcast talent for that, because I knew how big and prestigious of a project it was going to be. So I was just very much like trying to, like, you know, maybe try to play a role behind the scenes and kind of work my way in that way. But yeah, to get that call was definitely a pretty big moment, and the whole experience was just kind of had me awestruck. Like it was pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, and it was kind of a weird time as well, man, because like, you know, I think you were, you know, and I can say this now that we're all free and clear of it. I don't think you were necessarily served particularly well by all of the pressure or anything that was put on that whole E-League thing, because we were still waiting on getting Thorin's paperwork cleared. And
Right.
there was a lot on Duncan's shoulders, right? Like in terms of the broadcast, you know, we'd had that we'd had that moment with Shaq. So I think there was a lot of people who were like, we got, you know, Duncan can clearly hold his own. He's not intimidated. You know, love him, hate him. We can do something with that. But then obviously we had this issue where we were, you know, taking a little bit longer than expected to get his paperwork there. So we had this period where it was like, you know, we had a few weeks where we were going to have to go out and get people to come in. Now, what we needed was Americans primarily, right? We had
Yeah.
to go and get people who we weren't going to have to go through the paperwork process, because that would have
Exactly.
even if those people had swept through it by that point, it was going to take a little bit longer. So
Mm.
out of the choices that we had, right? I mean, people were coming to me and going, right, Richard, like we need you to pull some fucking names out of a hat here, like. So like the way I always envisioned it was like you'd have Mo as like the really loud, bombastic dude, and you would be the more kind of down to earth guy, you
Right.
know, like who would come up with some statistic things. And obviously, we had Moses as well in there. So we had, you know, I thought like components we could work with. But then obviously what started happening was like basically we were kind of being pressurized to make every second of TV like solid fucking gold, like because
Mm.
everyone was a little bit worried about like, you know, how the ratings were gonna go, like what did we actually have here, and suddenly it became this almost like weird environment where it was like not everybody was gonna get like opportunities, you know what I mean? And it's really weird because what happened later with the FGC stuff was, you know, I think there was a little bit more willingness to take some risks and let people have moments. And I don't know, man. I felt that it like if we'd done CS second, you know, I think things would have been like very, very different. Like for example, I think you could have had like maybe a recurring role in some capacity. We would have had that like flexibility. But like I
Right.
just know that the TV execs were just like, look at Mo going fucking wild. This is like we just want as much of this as possible.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what ended up dominating the show, right? I mean, the Moses and Mo combo.
Yeah, that was definitely the case. I mean, the thing that got me and this is like no fault of yours or anyone else's, but I didn't even know that Mo was going to be there. no one had told me. So I just remember showing up like the morning before our, rehearsal or whatever, or just like our pre-production meeting. And I remember going to like a Chick-fil-A that was in our hotel and getting some breakfast. And all of a sudden Mo's just sitting at a table in the Chick-fil-A. And I was like, Mo, what are you doing here, man? What's going on? He's like, oh, I'm on E-League. And I was like, oh, all right. That's cool. Like, what's up, man? How you doing? Like, I mean, obviously knew him from Counter-Strike Source and Go back in the day. And I mean, we weren't like necessarily good friends or anything, but we, were friendly with each other. We didn't have any beef with each other or anything like that. And then also I remember early on, we thought it was going to be a 4-person desk where all 4 of us were going to be on, like me, you, Mo, and Moses. But then it turned to a 3-person desk at the production meeting just because it made more sense. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it became known that like, all right, well now I'm kind of competing against Mo for time. Like I'm going to do some segments, he's going to do some segments. And at first we thought maybe we'll both be on the TV broadcast on Friday night, but then it became very clear only one of us was going to be. And then obviously in the end it was Mo who did it. And then I was like right before all his drama hit the fan, just a couple of weeks later, which is obviously another interesting thing you had to deal with. Because I know that eventually you guys were planning on maybe using him more throughout the season, but then that kind of killed that. The timing was as such that he wound up staying for like the first 3 weeks or something like that, and I went home after the first week. So it was definitely interesting, but I felt like I had still accomplished a lot while I was there. I felt like I had kind of shown what I was capable of, and definitely I saw like a huge spike in like social media following and things like that while I was there. So I felt like I accomplished a lot. I thought there was like some unfinished business that because I really wanted to be on that TV broadcast. But at the same time, I could walk away from that experience like thinking very positively of it, feeling like I had gained a lot from it. And obviously, it's something I'll remember and cherish because, it was a big opportunity and it was a ton of fun. And, I obviously hadn't been around the circuit like all the other guys had been to kind of notice the differences between what E-League was bringing to the table and what other tournament organizers were doing and the golf between that. But for me, it was still just exciting to be like, right across from where they do NBA stuff and, be in the studio and the crazy green room and everything else. It was eye-opening for me because I had never gotten to do anything like that before. It was a huge step up from anything else I had been a part of. So it was definitely like a big part of my career, like definitely a big moment.
So, I mean, coming out of that then, renewed vigor, like you say, it was this, big moment for you. So what kind of happens next? I mean, you kind of like metabolizing all of this like attention, being part of a TV broadcast, being in a TV studio, a lot of interviews, a lot of, that sort of thing going on. But then obviously you've got to come back down and get back into the kind of nitty gritty of the deep joys of competing for gigs in the online Counter-Strike world. So what happens then?
Well, it was kind of tough, actually, because when I came out of E-League, I had gained, like I said, a lot of social media followers. I had a lot of praise. I felt like I had done a pretty good job given the circumstances, and it felt great. Like I felt like this was maybe the start of something, but I actually didn't do another offline event for like 4 months or something like that after that event. So things like really died off super quickly. And that was also when CSGO kind of died off as well from doing their pro league. So the regular company I had been working for was gone. Like they had ended their pro league because they had basically kind of lost the war, I guess you could say, with some of the other leagues that were going on at the time. So they bowed out. And so I was kind of left with nothing. Like I was maybe doing like these little small online cups here and there, but I didn't get to another offline event until like a Northern Arena tournament I did in Toronto. Right. And then I did that and a couple other little online cups. And then it wasn't until November that I did another event. So I kept having these huge gaps of actually doing nothing, basically, and kind of twiddling my thumbs. And that's been kind of a reoccurring pattern in my career, even up till this day, where you'll just like get very feast or famine if you're not, one of the biggest names. And obviously that into 2016 was the whole Northern Arena Montreal and all the drama that surrounded that whole situation. So basically after E-League, I was on this really big high where I thought I was going places. And then I kind of stagnated, and then I kind of shot myself in the foot at the end of the year. And so it didn't really go the way I had hoped, but at least I was still kind of hanging around, I guess you could say.
Well, yeah, let's talk about the shooting in the foot. Like, as I don't even think, I've said this many times. Like, I think this is the most like stupid, like drama and like nonsense ever. Like, I still can't get my head around it. So, for those that don't know, that are watching this video, basically what happened was there was a situation where, as you said, it was DreamHack Montreal was the event, right?
No, it was Northern Arena Montreal.
Northern Arena Montreal. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was basically a situation where Smiths, who was like, a beleaguered player, playing in G2, many of us were saying that, he was certainly past his best. He was in his late 20s. He was a bit of a liability when it came to AWPing, and certainly had never been a great rifler in my opinion, even though people try to retcon history and say actually he started out as a rifler, and so yeah, he's always been a good rifler. I mean, none of it true. But then you were on a desk and you decided to make a joke involving Kappa, which, as we know, is the Twitch chat for sarcasm for some reason. I still don't know how that happened. And basically, you said, like, Smiths is a good AWPer while holding up a Kappa sign.
Well, you forgot I butchered a Conor McGregor quote before that.
So yes, you did. There is that. Yeah, you did sound like a fucking weird pirate. Like there was some weird shit there. Like from the bottom of me heart. Yeah, that was a bit weird. Like, I don't know what you're going for with that. Yeah, but that's fine. Look, we're all entitled to like fuck up a voice,
right,
or whatever. I mean, like shit, fucking Duncan does that all the time as well. But anyway, and then Van Silly shouted, "Yo, les noobs." And it was just incredible because, like, the convergence of circumstance for this to annoy anybody is mental. Like, because Smiths have been getting wrecked for ages, and he was called whiffs, and everyone was laughing at him because he was so comically bad and holding the team back. But people have been mocking him for so long. It had just gone past the point. And then you come along and make the joke, and then it gets even worse. Because you didn't even say "Yo, les noobs." Van Silly did. And Van Silly, no one bangs on Van Silly. No one gets angry with Van Silly over at all. In fact, people never even bring Van Silly into the story. And then the Reddit threads about how unprofessional it was and how you were bullying Smiths. And then Simple came out and called you a pig. It was mental. I can't. So I've got to ask you, I've been in my fair share of shit, and so I know what it's like. And listen, some people probably don't know this. I've been in some fucking dark places. I've been in some dark times, like when I've been locked in my dramas. I'm talking about like staring at my fucking hotel rafters thinking, will that hold my weight if I decide to string myself up? Like, no shit, right? Like, real bad. Because you think, it's hard to get perspective because you've got hundreds of people saying they'll kill you, they hate you, you've ruined everything, you're terrible. So just take me through it, because I'm guessing you came off that segment thinking, that went pretty well.
No, I knew I'd screwed it up before I even got off the desk. But yeah, so basically, just to like make a really long story short on what happened here. Basically, what happened is that going into the event, I definitely had a reputation of being very knowledgeable and being able to bring good analysis to the table. But a lot of people were critiquing me on being too boring and like just not bringing enough showmanship and kind of just, this guy knows a lot, but he's not really doing anything. He didn't really have a personality. He didn't really have a brand. I was just a guy that was regurgitating facts on a desk, right? And so I was in my own head going into the event. I'm like, man, I really got to figure out a way to inject my personality more into what I'm doing. Like, I can't just be this guy who knows a lot about the game and share some facts about the game. Like, I need to be able to banter with my, co-analyst and be able to, crack a joke or, just somewhat be a personality and not just be a robot that knows a lot about the game, basically, right? So I went to the event already in my own head about that, seeing a lot of critique about how boring I was and things of that nature. And basically what happened is some guy randomly in the crowd had a Kappa sign. And I was trying to think. It was Garrett, the other guy that was doing the analysis with me, because Stunna was the desk host, and he got the Kappa sign from this guy. So we need to use this somehow in the broadcast, guys. Like, I had this giant Kappa sign. Let's figure out a way to use it. And basically, they were like saying, we need to do something. We need to like come up with something funny, blah 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 blah. And so I thought this was like my moment to try something different and like try to do something funny, try to like do something memorable. And so I was just, in my own head, I was like, I gotta come up with something, man. Like, this is my opportunity to like do something funny and like do something crazy and like, be somebody that's not just, a guy regurgitating facts all the time. And that's basically what happened. And then, I did the joke and I came off and I knew that it didn't go well. I knew that the delivery was bad, that I had kind of messed it up. And I didn't know that I was going to get that much heat, but I certainly knew that it wasn't going to blow over very well. But I obviously couldn't know how bad it was going to get. And obviously, the biggest thing about it was it wasn't just drama that passed over like most drama does. It kept coming back up because people were putting it in like their little fail highlight videos that would get posted on Reddit, and the whole simple thing, like you said. And so, like that
Oh
super
god.
sim guy that does all those like
Yeah.
collages, it was like that. He kept posting stuff like videos with me in it, and like it just never died. It was drama that never died because it kept getting posted on Reddit over and over again in some different form or fashion. And as far as kind of like my take on it, about whether it was a mistake and all that good stuff, it was a mistake because it was just so horribly off brand for like who I was. Like if Thorin does that joke, he gets away with it easily because that's his brand. People expect that from him. No one expected that to come from me like that. It was just horribly off brand. It didn't make any sense for me to be doing that sort of thing. I was not this edgy personality. So for me to do something like that just didn't sync up at all with my persona, I guess you could say, or what have you. And it was, definitely mean. It definitely was a bad thing to say. I mean, certainly it's not bad to critique him for his play. If he's playing poorly, that's just your job as an analyst. But obviously, sometimes you can cross the threshold between Karik and being insulting, and obviously what I had said was definitely pretty insulting. And no matter what I did, I genuinely apologized to him after the fact and his whole team. I remember like Fallen and some other people were posting about it, so I actually reached out to him directly and had a conversation. And it got to a point where most
crazy.
Yeah,
Really?
and it got to a point where all the players were actually fine with me. Like talking to them privately, they were all cool. They didn't have any issues with me. They're like, "Don't worry about it, dude." But the community itself, like the viewers out there, they weren't letting go. Like to this day, people still downvote my shit into oblivion on Reddit if I post a piece of content, and will say "Yoles moves back to me" in the comments. Like it's just one of those things where some people just never let it go, man. Hell, even when I was going to tours for the Stream Hack event I just did like earlier this month, I had like French fans like randomly just DMing me, not like threats or anything like that, but just like insulting things and stuff. So it's just weird how that all played out. And again, it was one of the things where, like you said, it hit the bowling point. I happened to be the last domino at the end of the line when it was all falling down, so all the weight was pretty much on me as far as the joke that I made and what people remember. So it was just a perfect storm that ruined. Yeah,
I'll say this as well, like, because I think players, they're fucking assholes too sometimes, like I think they sense that, they could like make their little point about how like desk talent shouldn't ever insult their lofty fucking beings, right? Like, and use you basically as the sort of example, right? Because if they try to do that to me, I'd just fucking roast them all. Like I wouldn't tolerate it, and they're definitely not going to do it to Duncan, right? So here you are, like doing it for the first time ever, and that like why the fuck is falling? Like it's so insane that. But yeah, you're right. I remember it now. Fuck, all the players got involved. But anyway, you still haven't said like how does it make you how it made you feel at the time, because the similar thing with me was the Raheem stuff. And that was so absurd. And like reading stuff that I know I didn't do, and having stuff attributed to me that I know I didn't say, and having the people call me a bully, and then having also to like have this relationship breakdown with a company that I'd worked with many times, with somebody I'd known for years. It really fucking sucked. Like I nearly didn't go in for the rest of the show, and then I thought, well, that'll blow it up even more if I walk away. And yeah, it made me feel very depressed, very down, because I know I didn't do the things that I was accused of, and everyone laughs about it right now, but that wasn't fun for me at all. Like I didn't enjoy that at all.
No, this was definitely like the lowest point of my esports career by like a substantial margin. Like the only other time period that I had felt this low was like when my mother had passed in 2015, and I was like in my own head about a lot of stuff. So this moment, especially after riding the high of E-League early in the year and starting to finally line up some work, like this really brought me down, because I was genuinely thinking to myself that there's no way anyone wants to touch me after this. Like, maybe some other people can get away with some drama if they're good enough and they have a big enough brand and they're popular enough with the community overall. But little peon dusT, like, nah, I'm about to get wrecked. Like, I'm not going to get hired for anything. Like, this is the end of the line. Remember, earlier I talked about how, E-League kind of made me want to go until the end of the year and see how far I could go, and to make a decision, in early 2017, whether I wanted to keep going or whether I wanted to just pursue a traditional career. This was that like defining moment where it's like, yep, it's going to be the career time. Like the esports dream is totally dead. And the worst part is that I knew after this event was over that I was actually headed to London to go do ECS as an analyst. And I'm like, man, do they even still want to keep me on board after all this heat? And they did. Like, I still wound up going to that a couple of weeks later and doing some analyst desk spots for the ECS season alongside Vendetta. But then going into early 2017, I mean, no one was really talking to me. I thought, man, like I had really kind of, killed whatever popularity I did have, which wasn't very much to begin with. But now whatever it was is pretty much gone after this. But basically, I just kind of got lucky that DreamHack Open kind of lent me a hand. And really, Vince is a big part of this because he needed a duo partner for these DreamHack Open events he was going to be doing in Europe for the year, like Leipzig and Tor and a couple other spots in Europe. And he basically kind of lent out a hand because we had been staying in touch with each other ever since that Gfinity event that I met you at. Because not only did I do a Decimate at that event, but also that was the first time me and Vince casted together. We did like this ridiculous. It's like still one of the few best of fives I've gone to all 5 maps in CSGO history. It was like Tempo Storm versus Virtus Pro. And it went all 5 maps and it was wild. And we casted that together and we were really good friends from that point forward. And so he kind of reached out a hand, I think, to kind of help me out, basically get some of these DreamHack Open events I got in 2017. But even through all of that, I still really felt like that whole situation was really holding me back from doing more than what I was doing, basically. And I don't know if it was or not. Like, I don't know how much TOs care about those sort of thing or not. They always tell you to the face that they don't care, but part of you does feel like, man, surely they do somewhat think about community opinion whenever they're doing these hiring decisions, right? So it was definitely a really deep, dark place I was in that whole way through because I just didn't know how to get out of it. Like I apologized, which wasn't just apologizing for the sake of trying to save my career, but I legitimately did feel bad that these players were feeling so bad about what I said. Like I never meant for it to be some personal attack, like it was just supposed to be a stupid joke. So yeah, I was really down on myself because I didn't want to be perceived as this asshole. Like that's not me. Like I'm not that guy. Like, I've always tried to be friendly and helpful and nice to almost anyone I come across. And so it was dark for the career aspect. It was also dark because I felt like people had the wrong perception of who I was. Like the people were making me out to be an asshole and I'm not. So it was tough, man.
Did any of the other guys like, DreamHack and stuff like bring this up? Because again, I can't believe that it blew up to the degree it did. But equally, I know, I mean, shit, man, because obviously we all know how fucking DreamHack handled my fucking shit. Those guys, especially, like for whatever reason, they've gone from being a company that used to be the opposite of safe. Like they didn't give a fuck. Like let's take risks. Let's put Duncan on. Let's tell him to wear a Lakers jersey. Let's have like all this crazy shit going on, and let's do it DreamHack style. To now where if anything, that they kind of aren't true to themselves anymore, and I know they think about community perceptions a lot. So did they ever talk to you about like the Smiths incident?
No, I never heard anything from any actual like hiring person from any tournament about any of that. I can't ever know.
At least.
Yeah, I mean, I can't ever know if like it still affected hiring decisions about me or not at that time. Maybe I would have gotten more events if that situation hadn't happened than what I did. I mean, I'll never know that, but certainly no TO came up to me and said, hey, we're really concerned about this. Like, can you give an apology? Or like, I've never actually, the only people I ever talked about the situation was like fellow talent. Like, no one else from like an actual company said anything to me about it. No.
So how do you sort of go about turning that around then? I mean, because you're talking about going to DreamHack and getting back into the swing of things and working with Vince and everything. Like, was there ever a chance, like ever a point where thinking back to how traumatic that time was, like that you were like, do you know what? I don't know if I want to do it again. I don't know if I want to put myself out there and risk it because I feel like we all live in this world where we're like one joke that doesn't land or we trip over our words. I mean, shit, like you can say something that sounds like something else because you get tongue-tied and that can be a fucking career ender and you're just gone and that's that. And people will just write whatever little fictitious narrative about you they want to have. So was there any like PTSD? Like you were fucking scared of getting back into it?
I was certainly scared to go to France just a few months after it happened, right? Because I feel like the French scene was still very much angry with me. Because I did that like back in May of the next year, so it was only like maybe a few months after that whole incident happened that I went over to DreamHack Tour in France. So that was a little bit concerning. I think for me, like I never lost a passion for being a commentator and an analyst. Like I always still wanted to pursue that as a career. The only thing that was in my mind was like, is there now a ceiling on how far I can go because of the reputation damage that I did or something like that, right? That was always a fear. And sure, like there was moments where I, got really fed up from like listening to all the stuff on social media and Reddit and stuff like that, and all the insults are starting to get to me. I used to be pretty thick-skinned and be able to kind of take all that stuff and just kind of take it in stride and just keep going. Don't really let it bother me. But certainly during, the end of 2016 and really through a lot of the next year, like all through 2017, there was definitely a lot of doubt on how good I was and if people would accept me and if people would give me another chance, as far as like, people's opinions of me in the community, not necessarily like tournament organizers and stuff like that. So yeah, there was always this fear of, am I going to be able to stay consistent? Am I going to be able to earn enough money to actually keep doing this? There was definitely all that swelling, and it was definitely, like I said, a low point for me. It was very depressing, but I knew that I always still wanted to try to pursue. Like I would never forgive myself if I just quit and that be how I go out. Like that's my last moment is that moment. Like I definitely didn't want that to be the case.
That would have been a fucking shitty footnote, right?
Yeah. So there was definitely there was certainly doubt, but I never really seriously considered quitting. Like once I started getting asked to do things, which was pretty shortly after that all happened, like ECS was like actually just later that month, like just a few weeks after it all happened. And then, I did my first DreamHack Open event in January of 2017. So I was only a couple of months after the fact. So, I mean, in my mind, I was like, as long as people are going to make me offers, then I'm going to keep taking them and just try to battle through it. Just try to be better at my job, really work harder at my knowledge and really work harder at my delivery. And just try to be better, at everything I can. Just self-improvement. Maybe people will eventually see that, I've improved and therefore that's more important than some joke I told. So yeah, I mean, I tried to make it as positive as I could, basically try to turn it in a positive direction as best as I could.
So let's talk about the hookup with Vince and how you guys have become this, duo and that have been doing the dream hacks and stuff. Because Vince has had his own kind of, up and down because of his health problems and looked like he was going to be out. And then he came back and he did that major. And then he was like, right, okay, I'd be silly to really quit after that. So now I'm going to keep going to events. But, there's this weird thing in our industry where we do seem to have duos. We do seem to have partnerships. And if you're that guy who's like the odd man out, you don't get hired because we hire a duo and we hire a duo and we hire a duo. So why do I need this one floating guy? I don't. And I think that's been a problem for a lot of guys who've come through the industry that didn't get their duo. They never found their partner, right? So Vince had that problem for a while. You've obviously had that problem. Been other examples out there. So how did it all come about? Because, I know you guys know each other, but what with Vince being associated with On Fire, I think a lot of people felt, he could have paired up with somebody else from there, right? Like maybe that would have been a natural thing that happened.
Sure. So, I mean, basically what happened was again, we had kind of formed a friendship at that Gfinity event back in early 2016, casting some games there that we didn't even plan for that. We just got scheduled that way. Like we were all just kind of rotating and we really hit it off. Like I knew he was really strong play-by-play. I knew that I could bring a lot to the table as a color caster when it came to strategy and stuff like that and add some context to him being a storyteller. And so it just worked. And, like I said, in early 2017, after all the Smith drama, I felt like Vince was still like, a super good friend of mine. I feel like he kind of reached out a helping hand and was like, hey, DreamHack wants to hire me for these DreamHack Open events to commentate. They asked me who I wanted to work with, like if I had a duo partner I wanted to work with. And, I gave him your name and we'll see what happens. And that's basically the show. Like I did that DreamHack Leipzig event in Germany in the beginning of 2017 with him. And we also did tours in summer, like in like May and June, I think it was. I also did like a DreamHack Austin event before the summer with Launders, funnily enough. That was like a really weird pairing, but we made the most of it, had a good time. And that was mostly just because it was just like an NA based event. I was NA based, just made sense to bring me out to go do that. And basically, we also did DreamHack Masters Malmo remotely as well. That was like kind of the big finishing touch to it. And so that's basically from early to mid 2017. We were just doing because of DreamHack, basically, hiring us together repeatedly, and we wanted to keep it going. At least that's my understanding of it. But what happened is that towards the end of the year, like you said, with the whole On Fire thing, that's whenever the first Blast event came rolling around, which is Blast Copenhagen in 2017, which also was just like a week apart from DreamHack Winter at the very end of the year. And so what happened is like with that whole situation, they actually paired up Vince with Vendetta to do Blast Copenhagen and DreamHack Winter. Right. And so that kind of killed the duo, not because that's what we intended to happen, but that's just how it happened as far as tournament hiring and who they wanted to hire and things of that nature. And it's never was going to be one of those things where I was going to hold Vince back and tell him not to accept work that, refused to hire me to go along with him. Like that would just be wrong of me to do. I don't want to limit his opportunities. And it's definitely one of those things where you can try to be a duo as much as you want, but at the end of the day, if a tournament doesn't want to play ball with you as a duo and they want to hire X with, Y and you're not Y, there's not a whole lot you can really do about it other than give some type of ultimatum. But the ultimatum is like, well, then we'll just hire someone else, right? So that's kind of what killed the duo in 2017. And he also, obviously, at the end of that year, also just got like a lot of opportunities to do like an EPL finals. I think Pansy got sick for like an EPL finals at the end of that year that he went and did. So he kind of replaced her. And then obviously there was the whole thing with Sadikist, which led him to cast with Henry G at like a DreamHack Masters event kind of early in 2018. And he kept getting these opportunities. And so we just never synced back up. And I eventually was, getting some desk analyst work at a couple of different events for DreamHack Open in 2018. And so we just kind of split up, like not because we wanted to, that's just how it happened. But then, at this year, Vince decided he wanted to make his comeback after filling in for the major, and he really wanted to do a partner. And, I think you've already kind of talked to him about maybe why he wanted to do that. He certainly put it out there a lot. I can't speak for him, but I think he just wanted something consistent to build chemistry with and, have someone who emphasized his strengths, that he could also emphasize their strengths and just have a partnership. And we had an opportunity to work some DreamHack events together again. And that's basically it. We were like, let's try, let's try to do this again. That's what we're trying to do now, basically.
Well, how's it been going? I mean, it can be tough, right, to sort of get into the swing of a new partnership, like, and come out the gate. Especially, I feel like the great thing about CSGO commentary is that the way it works, it's a lot more sophisticated than just, I do play-by-play, you do color, you talk in these moments, and I talk in these moments. There's like an ebb and flow to it, and it's something that gets better with time, and the more that you cast with a prospective partner, and you learn each other's, when the dips are and when you need to, come in and fill them. So how do you think it's been working out so far with Vince?
Well, yeah, we've only done 2 events together, Tor and then Dallas remotely, and this is after not having casted together in an offline environment for like 2 years. So it's definitely obviously like working the rust off. And while we're very good friends and have kind of natural chemistry, there's obviously still some things you need to work on, like you said, as far as when's the appropriate time for me to kind of step in and share some analysis, when's the appropriate time to pass it back to him. Because I don't want to pass it back to him in the middle of a climactic moment. I want to get it to him far before, so we can kind of start at the basement level of his voice and his storytelling and kind of build up the story as it goes, and then have the big crescendo at the end. So I need to make sure that I'm not passing it to him too late when it's already kind of kicked up a notch, give that time to build a story. That's what he's really good at. And, him, it's about, finding slow moments where I can bring value as an analyst. Like, I know that this team likes to do this, or this player likes to do this, so look out for this, or, oh, they're doing this. This means they're probably going to do this next, and kind of call the play before it even happens, which I think is like something I really try to focus on, is, again, preparing the viewer for what they're about to see. So I think that obviously there's still some things that we have to work on as far as timing, as far as, passing back and forth more, and not, like you said, just making it to where I'm only talking during freeze time, or I'm talking too long into action. Like, there's definitely some things where we need to work on our throwing back and forth a bit more. Also, like, I still need to work on delivery in some regards. Sometimes I can still talk way too fast, and I need to be able to slow down. And I never feel like I talk too fast where people can't understand what I'm saying. But I definitely can sometimes like mispronounce a word or do something silly just because I needed to slow down and think more. and then I would have presented the message a lot better because I could have slowed down. I could have thought of a better word to use than the one that I chose to vary up my vocabulary a bit more. So there's definitely some delivery stuff on my end. I think Vince is already there. Like I think Vince is already just so amazing, and I'm so fortunate to have a partner that's that talented. And I think it's more of just me trying to figure out how to fit in and how to be better in my own delivery. But I think so far so good. I think most of the reception for us has been pretty positive. I know that he has like a pretty decent stream community that's pretty supportive. I know that your community, the No Majors Club, has been pretty supportive. So I think so far so good. I think the biggest challenge for
when
us
they're not spamming outrageous copy pastas in the chat.
Well, that's all still love in my opinion, So I'll take it as love. I'll take it how I can get it, But no, I think the biggest challenge we're going to face is just getting hired together consistently. Because again, all it's going to take is for one tournament to want to hire Vince, but not me. And what are we going to do then, right? Like, I'm not going to tell Vince not to take the work, right. It's his, I'm not going to limit his opportunities, but, it also kind of kills the idea of the duo in the eyes of the community if they see him working with someone else, right? So it's difficult. It's very hard to enforce a duo outside of the top three. I think, obviously Scrawny and Launders are doing a great job. And I know Harry and Hugo are trying to work together a lot as well. So there's definitely some other people trying to do it, but it can become very difficult because, again, there's not much you can do if a tournament doesn't want to keep it up, other than like an ultimatum where you just lose. So it's tough.
I think we're getting to a stage now, honestly, dude, where I think we're gonna start seeing the exclusivity of casters in a way. I think now is the time for we're all doing this weird soft exclusivity with teams. Right? I mean, that's happening. That's going on in 2019. I get the value that has, but I think it's probably time for tournament organizers to go out and actually put broadcast teams together. I think there's a lot of value in that. And I know from my time on E-League, and I think one of the things E-League lacks now, and this is no disrespect to anyone who continues to work over there, because they've got a lot of friends, a lot of love, and obviously respect anybody that steps up and does TV work. Like E-League is still a fantastic broadcast, but having the regular, recurring, broadcast team helps the fucking broadcast be better because everybody knows everybody's beats. Same thing we're talking about here about how duos work. You want that same TV broadcast feel every weekend, when it comes around, that everybody knows what's going on, everybody knows the tone, everybody knows where the threshold levels are for humor, and you can tell when someone's in a good mood or when someone is in a bad mood, or someone has a point they want to make and definitely wants to make it before we have to go to commercial. So you got to give them some time, even if you have to go off the, you pick up all these little things, right? So I want to see tournament organizers embrace that and be like, fuck it, dude. Like Henry and Sato, you're only going to hear them at ESL events. This is just all theoretics, right? And then,
sure.
Lawrence and Scrawny, maybe they do all the Blast events. And then I think in building these teams, and obviously DDK and Bardolph, they're gonna do the Face It events, and then we can't just have two people, right? So now we're gonna go out and we got to get some exclusivity for the other guys. Like who's gonna be the guys that flesh out the broadcast. And that's where it gets interesting, and I think that's where all the opportunities can come for guys like yourself, because in the current system, If we have the same casters at every event, they're always going to pick the same casters. Like if we in our minds concoct some tier system, which I've always said is bullshit, I think you can certainly say, for example, like Sadakist is one of the best all-rounders, right? Like you can certainly say that, and
sure.
quite possibly the best CS caster. Mm-hmm. But that changes, and then Moses is the most versatile, and Anders is the original voice, and wasn't it good seeing Anders again at Dallas, and slim and healthy.
Yeah, he looks really good, man. He's definitely on that fitness grind. He's doing a great job.
Yeah, so this is what I want to see. I think rather than having the same voices kind of just at every event, ubiquitous, and basically they do as much work as they're willing to put themselves through, I'd like to see TOs basically pay big bucks to sort of get voices locked in, and I think that gives us a much richer broadcast landscape. What do you think?
I think that's like kind of already softly happens. Like I think you already do kind of see certain tournaments, definitely kind of favoring certain groups. So it already kind of happens. And I know that in the past, I think that there's been some different like retainer deals that Twitch had with people and stuff like that. So I think that that's kind of happened at times, maybe already. But I mean, I think it's a good idea in theory, as long as you can actually earn enough if you're exclusive to one organization to actually survive. Because I can tell you right now, like let's say, I do a lot of work for DreamHack right now, right? Like let's say like Vince and I became the DreamHack duo. I couldn't survive off of just like DreamHack Open events. Like there's no way. Like I'd have to like have another job on the side or something like that. So I think it would really just come down to whether or not it was like economically feasible for everyone to do something like that. But certainly, I think that the idea itself is fine. Like you said, you kind of maybe you have a certain brand, a certain flavor that you like your product to be represented as, and maybe a certain pairing of people or a group of people is the best broadcasters to present that brand to the audience and represent your sponsors a certain way or however you want to do it. So I definitely, am open to something like that. But again, it just depends on the economics of it, I guess. Well, because what if your company fails? Then you have to eventually go work for someone else, right? Or you're done. So I think there's a lot of that you have to worry about.
That's fair. I think for me, it's just like, as much as I love all of the guys that work, it's just nice to get like a refreshing change every so often. You tune in and hey, it's Vincent dusT. Yeah, it's Londis and Scrawny. It's like this is. I think this is the kind of thing that we never really talk about. That sometimes you get broadcast fatigue. It's not just the fact the same teams are playing the same teams over and over again for the same stakes, and it's the same maps and it's the same game, but it's also voiced by the same people over and over again. So it does kind of give this like holistic deja vu. So I think it's heading in the right direction. Like we've got a lot more people, it seems right now, a lot of duos out there that I think can do the job, and I'm hoping that we see more of it in 2019 and 2020 and beyond. So what's kind of going to be next on the horizon? Do you have anything locked into place as to where the next gig's going to be that you can talk about?
No, I actually have nothing lined up right now. I think the only thing I have lined up is I have like another DreamHack Open event I know for sure I'm doing, but it's like way later in the year. So there's like a pretty substantial gap between now and then. But outside of that, no, like it's very much up in the air as usually the case for me. Like, again, it's a very consistent pattern of feast and famine. So hopefully there's not much famine, but yeah, as of right now, I no idea what's next or when.
Interesting. Back into the abyss, just the way we like
exactly.
It.
Yeah.
All right. So look, man. Any final thoughts? Because there's a chance this will get on Reddit. Maybe I can't tell if I'm loved or hated right now. I always get mixed up with which one it is. Like, and it comes and goes. So, but maybe the combination of us will offset it, and it'll find its way into Reddit or whatever. So, any final thoughts? Anything that you feel that you should say?
Yeah, I mean, the only final thoughts I really have just about everything is just like, obviously, I know a lot of people think that I'm a better analyst than a caster and that I should have focused on that. But at the end of the day, like, I have to be flexible in order to maximize my chances for opportunities. And unfortunately, those opportunities just haven't really been there for me consistently. And not only that, but I actually really enjoy strategy and tactics in Counter-Strike. And I think that casting provides a platform where I have more room to talk about that. And obviously, I just love Vince, so I'm glad to get to work with him again. So I just hope people will kind of, give us a chance as a duo and kind of, give us some time, because it's going to take a bit of time for me to get my level of casting up to where it needs to be. I think I'm on the right track, and I think I have improved in a lot of areas, but I still definitely know that there's some areas I still need to work on, and we need to work on as a duo. So hope people will support it. Obviously, shout out to you and Sam, who've always been great friends of mine and great supporters, and great shout out to all the other talent out there as well in the scene who have always had my back. Particularly someone like Moses has had my back on multiple occasions. So definitely shout out to all those, and yeah, shout out to Vince obviously at the end, because a great buddy of mine. Glad we get to work together. And so, yeah, I mean, that's really it. Just appreciate all the support for those of you out there who have been supporting, and hopefully a bright future's ahead.
Well, yeah, hopefully indeed. So, look, thanks for making the time, buddy. Been a long time coming. Hope it wasn't too painful for you. And,
no, not at all.
No doubt I'll catch you with whatever fucking wacky online bullshit I'm up to in a month or two. So there you have it. That is dusT Mouret. Make sure you show him some love a guy who's been in the scene for a long, long time, had some ups, had some downs, is unfairly mischaracterized, I would say, by large swathes of the community who don't support his content and act like assholes because of one joke about a player who doesn't even fucking play anymore. Let's put that to bed. And obviously, him and Vince got a bright partnership ahead. So there you go. So just a reminder, of course, that you can go and support Rivalry.com if you like this content. Go over there. It's a great environment if you want to play some esports bets. You know, and enter as well this thing they do called Thunderdome. It's basically where you make predictions for games. It's not even gambling. It's a game of skill. You get to use your knowledge and pick out winners and win cash prizes up to $1,000. So completely free to enter. So go and check that out. And much love to them. It's a great partnership that we have, and love working with them. So I hope you enjoyed the interview. There'll be another one coming very soon. I have no idea when, but rest assured that this is the place to be for top tier Counter-Strike content involving yours truly and lots of other cool people. So until the next show, take care of yourselves.
It was pretty good, but the opponents sucked.
Yeah, kind of like a breakup. I mean, I think it should have almost felt that way in a sense.